is a lot coming out around this article. Yesterday I did a video. A'ja Wilson named the Time Athlete of the Year, Time Magazine. Somebody did have a great question in the comments. Who reads Time these days? That's a good point. That's a hell of a point, to be quite honest with you. But it seems that Time Magazine has reverted back to its.
In the year leading up to the decision, A'ja Wilson found herself navigating an increasingly complex media environment. Narratives swirled around generational change, cultural divides, and the shifting face of women's basketball. Questions surfaced repeatedly, especially following high-profile media coverage and major publications. Wilson addressed these narratives carefully. She rejected attempts to frame her name within divisive or polarizing conversations. She made it clear, publicly and repeatedly, that she did not want her legacy used as a symbol for conflict. Her words were measured, deliberate, and firm. And yet, the noise persisted. The contrast was striking. In one year, she was celebrated, elevated, and recognized at the highest levels. In the next, those same platforms began interrogating the very narrative she had tried to distance herself from. To her, the contradiction felt impossible to ignore. But institutions do not move based on feelings. They move based on strategy. When the final decision came, it was absolute. This was not a demotion. Not a pause. Not a symbolic reshuffling. It was a clean break. A declaration that the future would not include her, at least not in this chapter. For those closest to Wilson, the realization was painful but clarifying. The warning signs had been subtle but consistent. The shift in tone. The emphasis on chemistry. The growing importance of optics and audience impact. The prioritization of what comes next over what came before. Wilson's public comments about respect, about journeys, about recognition had been calm on the surface. But beneath them was an unmistakable tension. A sense that the ground was moving faster than acknowledgement could keep up with. In the end, this wasn't about one article. Or one interview. Or one narrative. It was about misalignment between perception and reality. Between legacy and direction. Between what had been earned and what was now required. And that is what made the call so devastating. Not because it erased her greatness, but because it revealed, without apology, that greatness alone was no longer enough.
That's a great honor. Congratulations to A'ja. But I'm like, what is all this ruckus about? So then we dive deep into it, and it seems like there's some paragraphs from this article that put down Caitlin Clark in order to prop up A'ja, which is crazy because if you guys remember, Caitlin Clark was Time's Sportsperson of the Year just last year. So I haven't actually gone into detail reading these. I wanted to live react to them with you. This video might be a little rambly, a little ranty, but let's jump right in.
For devoted fans of women's basketball, A'ja Wilson represented something close to inevitability. She wasn't just a star, she was an institution. An unshakable pillar of Team USA. The kind of player whose name felt permanently etched into international rosters long before selections were officially announced. Her presence wasn't debated. It was assumed. For years, Wilson symbolized stability at the highest level. Dominant performances. Championship moments. Olympic success. She embodied reliability in a program built on excellence. To question her place wasn't merely controversial, it felt irrational. Almost disrespectful. And that collective belief, shared by fans, analysts, and even players, is precisely why what followed sent shockwaves through the sport. When the news surfaced, it didn't just surprise people, it unsettled them. Because it challenged a core assumption that had quietly governed women's basketball for years, that certain players had reached a status beyond removal. That once you crossed a particular threshold of achievement, your role became permanent. But this moment shattered that illusion. Almost overnight, the fundamental power structure of the sport shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But decisively. It was the kind of change that doesn't announce itself with chaos, it announces itself with finality. A line had been crossed, and everyone felt it, even if they couldn't immediately articulate why. What made the decision so jarring wasn't simply the exclusion itself. It was who the exclusion involved. This wasn't a declining veteran clinging to relevance. This was a player still operating at an elite level. Still commanding respect. Still producing results. And yet, somehow, no longer aligned with the direction being chosen. That realization forced a reckoning. If someone as established as Wilson could be removed, then the rules had changed. Legacy was no longer a shield. Reputation was no longer protection. The system was evolving, and it was no longer obligated to carry its icons with it. For fans, the emotional response was immediate. Confusion turned to disbelief. Disbelief turned to anger. And anger quickly sought explanation. Was this about basketball? About chemistry? About image? About something no one wanted to say out loud? The answers were elusive. And that uncertainty only intensified the impact. Because when institutions move without explanation, people fill the gaps themselves. What became clear, however, was this: women's basketball had entered a new phase. One where history mattered, but only to a point. One where future planning outweighed past accomplishment. And one where even the most established figures could be repositioned or removed without warning. The ground had shifted. And everyone could feel it.
A'ja Wilson, she got to get this award. And somehow, some way, nothing can ever be done involving A'ja Wilson without either Time Magazine or the sports media using Caitlin Clark's name to get everybody riled up, because they called Caitlin Clark's fans toxic, racial, divisive, yada, yada, yada. In other words, used an article to crap on you guys.
Imagine a moment so ordinary that it barely registers at first. A phone rings, a call is answered, and within minutes a career built over decades is fundamentally altered. One conversation, delivered without ceremony or warning, becomes the dividing line between permanence and replacement. How can years of dominance, sacrifice, and historic achievement disappear so abruptly? And who truly decides who remains on the world's most exclusive stage and who is quietly removed from it? This was never just about basketball. It was about power, timing, and control. About how elite institutions evolve behind closed doors, long before the public realizes a shift has occurred. While fans debate loyalty and legacy, decisions are shaped by data, chemistry, optics, and long-term direction. By the time the outcome becomes visible, it has already been finalized. For years, A'ja Wilson represented certainty itself. To fans, she was an unshakable pillar of Team USA, an indomitable force whose presence felt permanent, unquestionable, inevitable. Olympic gold, WNBA dominance, and sustained excellence had elevated her beyond scrutiny. Her name wasn't expected to appear on a roster list, it was assumed. That belief shaped everything. Wilson planned her seasons with the confidence of someone who believed her position was secure, not just earned, but assured by history. Her legacy, she believed, would always outweigh evolving team dynamics, shifting styles of play, or emerging narratives about the future of the game. So when the call from USA Basketball arrived on an otherwise routine Friday morning, she answered without hesitation. She expected logistics. Schedules. Preparations. The familiar formalities afforded to a seasoned superstar. Instead, she was met with finality. She wasn't being reassigned. She wasn't being rested. She wasn't being asked to mentor the next generation. She was being removed. No roster spot. No international stage. No opportunity to redefine the narrative. The message was unmistakable: Team USA had already moved forward. What made the moment even more jarring was how inevitable it appeared in hindsight. While Wilson operated from a place of earned security, the organization had been operating from projection, evaluating chemistry, direction, and alignment with the future. Public statements about respect, legacy, and recognition had been calm on the surface, but beneath them lingered tension. A growing disconnect between what had been built and what was now being prioritized. This wasn't the erasure of greatness. It was a declaration of change. And in that quiet phone call, women's basketball crossed a line, one that made it clear that even legends are not immune to being left behind.
From the nap, as of this moment, the Pacers are up 2-1 in the finals. Has there been anything that surprised you so far in the series? Obviously, Oklahoma City was the best team in the NBA all year, but right now they're not looking like themselves.
What surprised me is just it being the Pacers in the finals.
We aligned in that, brother. I didn't see that coming.
Right.
Okay, well, are y'all fans of the W? We also have the Fever in Indiana as well. What do y'all make of Caitlin?
Imagine a moment so sudden, so deceptively ordinary, that it feels almost insignificant at first. A phone rings. A conversation begins. And within minutes, a career that took decades to build is irrevocably altered. One phone call, no press conference, no public warning, becomes the dividing line between permanence and replacement. How does a legacy, once considered untouchable, evaporate in an instant? This is not simply a story about basketball. It is a story about power, timing, and control. About how elite systems quietly decide who still belongs and who no longer fits the future they are trying to construct. Behind closed doors, far from the roar of arenas and highlight reels, decisions are made that reshape entire landscapes. Careers don't always end with injuries or declines. Sometimes, they end with silence. What unseen forces determine who remains on the world's most exclusive stages and who is quietly removed? Is it performance alone or something far more complex? Chemistry, optics, data, narrative control. These are the invisible levers pulled long before the public ever notices a shift has occurred. By the time fans begin asking questions, the outcome is already sealed. What makes this particular saga resonate far beyond the athletic arena is what it represents. This wasn't just a roster adjustment. It was a cultural signal. A recalibration of expectations. A moment that forced players, fans, and institutions alike to confront an uncomfortable truth: longevity does not guarantee permanence, and legacy does not always outweigh direction. The repercussions of this decision extend outward in waves. Long-standing allegiances are tested. Locker room hierarchies are disrupted. Media narratives collide. And tensions that had been quietly simmering beneath the surface finally rise into the open. What was once whispered becomes debated. What was once assumed becomes questioned. This moment reshapes how greatness itself is measured. Not just by past dominance, but by present alignment. Not by medals collected, but by how seamlessly one fits into the future vision of the institution holding the power. And that realization sends a chill through every veteran who believed their resume alone would protect them. Because if this could happen here, if this career could be disrupted this abruptly, then no one is immune. The illusion of certainty dissolves. What remains is a sobering reminder: in elite systems, relevance is constantly renegotiated. And sometimes, the end doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives with a phone call.
Year last year, and in that article she was asked multiple times about these narratives around Caitlin and the racial divide that happens in America, and specifically around women's basketball. It has gotten so insane, and she has denounced it so many times. She said it in the Times article that she doesn't want her name to be used for these different negative and divisive things that it's used for. And the fact that Time magazine named her Sports Person of the Year in 2024, and then in 2025 turn around and put something like this in an article, by the way, you guys, that is supposed to prop.
The phone call came on a Friday morning, ordinary in every possible way. No warning. No build-up. No indication that anything was different. When USA Basketball's number appeared, Aya Wilson answered without hesitation or concern. Why would she? Calls like this had always meant routine matters. Scheduling discussions. Travel logistics. Preparations for upcoming international competitions. The ceremonial details typically afforded to a seasoned superstar whose presence was assumed, not debated. This was familiar territory. But familiarity can be misleading. What awaited her on the other end of the line was not logistics, it was finality. Not planning, but conclusion. The conversation didn't unfold gradually. It didn't soften the message. It delivered a stark confrontation with reality that no amount of past success could dilute. She wasn't being reassigned. She wasn't being rested. She wasn't being asked to mentor. She was being removed. No roster spot. No international stage. No opportunity for redemption or explanation. The message was unmistakable: Team USA had moved on. In that moment, the narrative she had built around her career fractured. Years of assumption collided with institutional decision-making. The future she had planned carefully, deliberately, evaporated in real time. What made the decision especially jarring for those close to her wasn't just the outcome, but how inevitable it seemed in hindsight. Wilson had structured her entire year around international competition. She declined lucrative opportunities. Adjusted her training. Spoke publicly with the confidence of someone who believed her place was secure. That confidence, once her strength, became her vulnerability. Because while she prepared as a certainty, USA Basketball prepared with data. With chemistry evaluations. With long-term projections. With media impact analysis. With institutional memory that extended beyond any single player, no matter how accomplished. The contrast was stark. One side operated on legacy. The other operated on alignment. And alignment won. This wasn't personal, but it wasn't accidental either. It was the culmination of months, perhaps years, of quiet evaluation. A decision reached long before the phone ever rang. By the time Wilson heard the words, the outcome had already been sealed.